have found something personal, important and new in her words.
No one has known how to make love read so importantly as she has.
As a historian and an unashamed fan, I'm fascinated by the story of how an anonymous minor novelist in her own lifetime became celebrated today as our very best loved writer. International celebration for an author whose fame ranks second only to Shakespeare. This gloriously eccentric hotel convention demonstrates the rampant commercialisation of the world Jane Austen made. There's an extraordinary array of merchandise, spin-offs from the Austen brand, Jane and the Damned, Austen as chick lit, Clueless, Emma, updated to an American high school, and here we have Bollywood, Bride and Prejudice. It's an astounding phenomenon. But underneath all the dressing up and the role play, the spin-offs and the merchandise, there are plenty of committed Austen readers.
I like the way she characterizes people, and the people that she writes about you can still see today.
I think anyone who's ever been in love will find an equal in one of her novels.
She has a wonderful, ironic tone that makes me think and gives me a sense of history and romance and great literature.
Here in Texas, Jane Austen, the commercial brand, dances hand in hand with an appreciation of Jane Austen, the serious novelist. And it's this partnership that gives Austen a unique position in the world of literature. At Sotheby's in London, the international sale rooms, brand Austen is the big attraction at today's auction.
220, 240, 260.
This is the sale of a rare Jane Austen fragment. In her short life, Austen only produced 6 complete novels, and every surviving scrap of her writing is of immense interest, especially if the manuscript is in her own hand. Here are 60 precious pages of an uncompleted novel written while she was living in Bath.
This is section...
Earlier on, I was lucky enough to be given a peek at the manuscript before it went under the hammer. I've never seen a Jane Austen manuscript before.
Yeah, it is a wonderful thing. It's so exciting to actually see her handwriting, and of course not just her handwriting. It's not just a letter. It's actually a literary manuscript, and not just a literary manuscript, but a working manuscript. As you can see, careful corrections.
This is the only manuscript draft, isn't it, of her unfinished novel?
Yeah, that's
The
right.
Watsons.
Yeah.
It's a very tantalising fragment, isn't it?
Yes.
Your lordship thinks we always have our own way.
Yeah.
That is a point on which ladies and gentlemen long disagreed. But without pretending to decide it, I may say that there are some circumstances which even women cannot control. Female economy will do a great deal, my lord, but it cannot turn a small income into a large one. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think what's really most important about this piece of work is its content, and that seems to me quite explosive, because there's a real angry voice in this, which is overlaid with more elegance, I think, in the other novels. Who do you think are going to be the big bidders?
I mean, obviously, I can't.
What sort of figure do you expect to get?
The estimate is 200.
Yours, sir, thank you.
The Watsons has just sold for a stunning £850,000, so that's 3 times the estimate. I think that's an amazing achievement for a woman who's struggled in genteel poverty. At her death, her manuscripts were burnt or scattered or just given away, and now she's provoked, just for a little fragment of a novel, a global bidding war. And the buyer who saved the manuscript for the nation was none other than the Bodleian Library in Oxford. It's a huge price to pay, and clear proof that Austen's academic status today is just as potent as her commercial brand. So how did Austen become our national treasure? To find the answer, you have to look at the history of how she was read, who was reading her and why. The very first people to read Jane Austen were her family. We know that Jane Austen was clever and precocious. She was writing by the age of 12. But then she was born into a big, bookish family. All her brothers and her beloved sister Cassandra, all of them loved reading, rereading, reading aloud, writing, drawing and amateur theatricals.
Come on!
The Austens adored putting on plays for family and friends.
Let's turn back quickly. Very well. But hasn't this walk been invigorating? Oh.
And even today, the locals still relish a bit of alfresco theatre.
I think I've twisted my ankle.
To allow me to offer my services, madam.
The teenage Jane was theatrical, irreverent and prolific, dashing off romantic parodies and satires for the entertainment of her clever siblings and bookish relatives. By her early 20s, Jane Austen had completed drafts of 2 novels, First Impressions and Eleanor and Marianne. But it would be another 14 years and numerous disappointments before she was finally published. Eleanor and Marianne became Sense and Sensibility and first went on sale 200 years ago in October 1811.
Oh, sir, however may I thank you? May I ask to whom I am so obliged?
His name, he replied, was
Willoughby, madam, currency of Allenham.
Oh, Mr.
his
Willoughby,
manly beauty and more than common gracefulness were instantly the theme of general admiration. And the laugh which his gallantry raised against Marianne received particular spirit from his exterior attractions. Marianne herself had seen less of his person than the rest, for the confusion which crimsoned over her face on his lifting her up had robbed her of the power of regarding him after their entering the house. But the people who first enjoyed these words had no idea who was writing them. Why do you think Jane Austen published anonymously?
Well, people say that it was because she was so modest and unassuming, which is baloney, actually, because Sir Walter Scott, who was the best-selling novelist of the age, also published anonymously.
So it's a polite convention only, then?
Yeah, it's a polite convention which enabled her to have quite a lot of fun, actually, because, of course, people guessed a lot. A lady in the village in Chawton, and Mrs. Benn, came round and Pride and Prejudice had just been delivered, and Jane Austen and her mum took turns reading out about half of the novel over several hours, and Mrs. Benn was delighted and said how brilliant the author must be, and Jane Austen didn't tell her that it was herself. I think she quite liked those sorts of games.
But calling it by a lady, it's not utterly anonymous, so she makes it clear that it's a female author. Do you think that affects the way readers would have viewed the novel at the time? Do you think women more likely to buy a novel by a lady?
I think saying by a lady on the title page did affect people's expectations. I think they would have known that it was an advertisement for the kind of product they were getting. They weren't going to get roistering scenes of sort of sexual impropriety.
So would they expect, what, a comedy of manners or romantic comedy in modern terms?
I think when you see By a Lady on the cover, what you expect is really a tale of courtship. You expect a story about a young woman who is not married at the beginning of the novel and is married at the end.